I know this is a place for stories that really hit you, and that's why I finally worked up the courage to tell what happened to me. It's been a while now, but some days it feels like it was just yesterday, you know? That Tuesday morning is still glued to my memory. A day that started like any other, but then everything got turned upside down in a way I never imagined. And believe me, I've seen a lot in this life on the road. My name is David, I'm 48, and of those years, more than 25 have been spent living from cab to cab. The road is my home, my world, and for a long time, the only company I had was Thor, my Belgian Malinois. He's more than a dog. He's a piece of my soul, my partner through thick and thin, with an instinct that saved my hide more than once. I was already used to the surprises the asphalt could throw at me, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I found that day. I was coming from a big delivery, the trailer loaded to the brim with electronics. The deadline was tight as always. We live in a rush, don't we? And there I was, in my own world, thinking about the next load, about all the things I still had to sort out back home. Music was playing softly on the radio, and the sun was already starting to beat down hard, promising one of those scorching hot days that melts the asphalt. Everything seemed normal, routine, until my eyes caught a scene that made my heart jump. There, on the side of the road, in the middle of nowhere, was a woman. And she wasn't just any woman. She was in a wedding dress, running barefoot, her gown dragging in the dust, and an expression of pure terror that you could feel from a mile away. Thor, who was asleep beside me, perked up his ears and let out a low growl, as if he sensed the danger in the air. That look in his eyes told me something was very, very wrong. I slowed down, my foot hovering over the brake. My gut was screaming at me to keep driving, to mind my own business, but something about the way she was running, the sheer panic in her eyes, wouldn't let me. Thor was whimpering now, a low, worried sound. He usually only did that when something was genuinely off, not just a deer crossing the road. As I got closer, I could see the smudges of dirt on her white dress, the frantic way she was looking over her shoulder. She seemed so fragile, so out of place on that desolate stretch of highway. It was like seeing a ghost, a vision that just didn't belong. Before I could even fully stop, she was there yanking open the passenger door. Her breath was coming in ragged gasps, and her eyes, wide with terror, met mine. "Please," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, just drive. Take me far away from here. Don't ask questions, just go." She tumbled into the seat, pulling the door shut with a shaky hand. Thor, instead of growling or barking, nudged her hand gently with his nose, a soft whine escaping him. It was a sign. If Thor was okay with her, if he sensed she was in trouble, then I knew I had to help. My rational brain was screaming danger, but my instincts and Thor's were telling me something else entirely. I didn't say a word, just put the truck in gear and hit the accelerator. My eyes were fixed on the rearview mirror for a few miles, half expecting to see something, someone, chasing us. But there was nothing, just the empty road stretching behind us. The silence in the cab was thick, heavy with her fear. She was breathing a little easier now, but still shaking, her knuckles white where she gripped the dashboard. I could feel her tension, like a live wire humming next to me. After a while, I spotted an old, abandoned gas station up ahead, just a dusty lot with crumbling pumps. It wasn't much, but it was out of sight from the main road, a good spot to pull over without drawing attention. I flicked the blinker and steered the rig into the lot, kicking up a cloud of red dust. The engine idled for a moment, and then I cut it. The sudden quiet was almost deafening, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. I turned to her, finally, ready to ask what the hell was going on. Her name, she told me in a voice still trembling, was Lara. Her name, she told me in a voice still trembling, was Lara. She hugged herself, pulling the white lace of her wedding dress tighter, as if to ward off a chill that wasn't in the air. Her eyes scanned the horizon, then darted back to mine, brimming with a mix of despair and a desperate plea for understanding. I was supposed to get married today," she whispered, her voice cracking, "to William." The name hung in the air, heavy and dark. She spat it out almost like a curse. "Everyone thinks he's perfect, rich, educated, from a powerful family, the ideal groom," they all said. "My family, society, they just saw the surface, but he's not. He's a monster, David, a violent, controlling monster." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, shivering visibly. "Despite the warm day, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. My whole life I've seen my mother live under a shadow, always submitting, always afraid. I promised myself I wouldn't repeat that. This marriage, it wasn't just a bad marriage. It was a trap. I knew, deep down, that if I walked down that aisle, I'd never walk out alive. He had a way of looking at me, a coldness in his eyes that went straight to my bones. He wanted to silence me. This wasn't about love or partnership. It was about control, about making sure I didn't breathe a word of what I knew." The raw terror in her voice was chilling, painting a picture far darker than any simple runaway bride scenario. I could see the fresh marks of despair on her face, the fatigue in her eyes, the sheer exhaustion of living under that kind of threat. It wasn't just physical escape, it was an escape from a life sentence of fear. Her whole body radiated a sense of urgent, profound danger. She took a shaky breath, her gaze fixed on the dusty floor of the truck cab. "He's not just violent, David. He's connected to some really dangerous people. He runs this whole network of money laundering." She hesitated, as if the words themselves were dangerous to speak aloud. "They deal in untraceable cash, funneling dirty money through legitimate businesses, making it all disappear. It's a massive operation, hidden right under everyone's noses." My eyebrows must have shot up, because she nodded grimly. "I know it sounds crazy, but I have proof. My cousin Robert, he was a lawyer. He stumbled onto it, all the details, the paper trail, everything. He trusted me with it. He left me a USB drive, notes, even some photos of their operations, hidden in a secret compartment in his old desk. He told me to hold on to it, to expose them if anything ever happened to him." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "And then something happened to him. They called it an accident. I know it wasn't. He was getting too close. I saw the fear in his eyes in the weeks before he died." Her hands went to her chest, as if clutching something precious and terrifying. "I managed to get the proof. It's why I was trying to run. The marriage was just a way to shut me up for good, to make sure I was under their control. Or worse, to get rid of me. I couldn't trust anyone in my family. The only person I could think of, the only hope I have, is a journalist. Her name is Teresa. She's an investigative reporter, known for taking on these kinds of big cases. She's in the capital, and I need to get these proofs to her. She's the only one who can expose him and bring this whole thing down. She's my only shot at a real life, a life free from this nightmare." The sheer weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and cold. My mind was racing, trying to process it all. A runaway bride, a powerful criminal, money laundering, a dead cousin, and a desperate plea to save her life. It was like something out of a movie. But the shaking in her hands, the genuine terror in her eyes told me it was real, terrifyingly real. I could have just told her no, that this was too big, too dangerous for a simple truck driver like me. I had a schedule to keep, a cargo to deliver, and a life that, while maybe a little lonely, was at least predictable. But then I looked at Thor, quiet beside her, his gaze fixed on her face, and I remembered his earlier whine, that knowing look he gave me. He trusted her, and I trusted him more than my own common sense. Sometimes, so I took a deep breath and let it out slow. "All right, Lara," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "We'll get you to Teresa. It won't be easy, and it's going to be dangerous. You understand that?" She nodded, her eyes wide, a flicker of something that looked like hope, fragile but real, starting to replace the pure fear. It was a silent agreement, a handshake made without words. I knew right then, with a gut feeling that rarely steered me wrong, that my life was about to change in a way I couldn't even begin to imagine. The road ahead, which had always been just about miles and deliveries, suddenly stretched out into an unknown territory, a path filled with shadows and dangers I'd never faced before. But looking at her, and at Thor, I also knew I couldn't just leave her. I knew the name, Teresa. Not personally, of course, but her name had popped up on the news, in articles I'd sometimes skimmed during breaks at truck stops. She was one of those journalists, the kind who dug deep, asking uncomfortable questions and shining a light on things powerful people wanted to keep hidden. Her face, stern and focused, had been on late-night news segments, always talking about some big investigation, some corrupt deal she'd exposed. She had a reputation for being fearless, for not backing down even when the threats started rolling in. For Lara to know her, to trust her, meant Teresa was the real deal, the only one brave enough or crazy enough to take on a guy like William and his whole network of money laundering. It made sense. Who else would you turn to when your life depended on bringing down someone so well connected, so untouchable? It wasn't just about getting the evidence to some random office. It was about finding someone with the guts and the reach to actually do something with it. My mind started putting pieces together. The whispers I'd heard about shady dealings in high places, the sudden disappearances of certain people, it all suddenly felt very, very real, closer than I ever imagined. The thought of driving straight into that kind of storm, it was daunting, to say the least. Lara seemed to relax a fraction, almost imperceptibly, now that the plan was set, even if it was a desperate one. But I could feel the knot tightening in my own stomach. We weren't just driving to another city, we were driving into a war zone, a hidden one, sure, but a war zone nonetheless. My old rig, usually just a means to haul cargo, was now a getaway. Vehicle, a shield. I glanced at the fuel gauge, calculating the miles. We couldn't just roll into the capital in broad daylight, certainly not with a bride in a dusty wedding dress riding shotgun. We'd need to be smart, move fast, and stay off the main radar. I thought about the sheer nerve it must have taken for Lara to get out of that wedding, to risk everything just to escape. The raw courage in her was something else. It was bigger than just running away. It was about fighting back, even if it meant risking everything. My instincts, the ones that had kept me safe on lonely roads for decades, were buzzing now, telling me this was going to be the longest, most dangerous trip of my life. But looking at her, seeing that sliver of hope in her eyes, I knew I had made the right call. We had to try. We had to give her a chance. I started the engine, the big diesel rumbling to life, a familiar sound that usually brought me comfort, but now felt like a giant target moving down the highway. The sun was getting higher, making the dust in the abandoned lot shimmer. Lara was still in that white dress, and it was a beacon, screaming for attention. "First thing," I said, looking at her in the rearview mirror, "we gotta get you out of that dress. You look like you just escaped a movie set. Not exactly subtle." She gave a weak, tired smile, a flicker of something almost human in her eyes. I had an old duffel bag with some spare clothes, worn-out jeans, a couple of faded t-shirts, a jacket. Nothing fancy, but it would have to do. The thought of stopping at a store, anywhere public, felt like a gamble we couldn't afford to take right now. Every minute counted. Every car that passed on the main road felt like it was watching us, felt like it knew. My gut was tight, a knot of unease spreading through my chest. The open road, usually my sanctuary, now felt like an exposed trap, every mile a potential ambush. We were no longer just on a delivery, we were on the run, and the stakes were higher than any cargo I'd ever hauled. We found a desolate stretch of road a few miles out, tucked away, behind some overgrown bushes. I pulled the truck over, leaving the engine idling while Lara quickly changed in the back of the cab. When she came back, she looked different, smaller somehow, less like a fragile bride, and more like someone ready to disappear into the crowd. The simple clothes, a dark t-shirt and jeans, helped ground her, made her seem less like a ghost. Thor, sensing the shift, nudged her leg again with his head, a silent reassurance. The wedding dress was bundled up, shoved under the seat, a stark white lump of a nightmare. We drove for what felt like hours after that, the silence in the cab punctuated only by the hum of the tires and the occasional snore from Thor. I kept checking my mirrors, my eyes constantly scanning the horizon, trying to spot anything out of place. Every sedan that pulled up behind me, every dark SUV, sent a jolt of adrenaline. Through me, Lara, quiet beside me, seemed lost in her own thoughts, her gaze fixed on the endless road ahead. But every now and then, I'd catch her looking at me, a silent gratitude in her eyes, a recognition that we were in this together, whether I liked it or not. The bond, fragile as it was starting to form, forged in the heat of desperation and shared danger. We must have put a good few 100 miles behind us when I finally saw it. Not a direct chase. Nothing dramatic like in the movies, but subtle. A dark sedan, tinted windows, sitting a little too long at a gas station I passed, then pulling out a bit too quickly. Then, a while later, a similar car, or maybe the same one, just a dot in my rear view, holding pace a few miles back, not gaining, not losing. My trucker intuition, honed by years of watching the road, screamed that something was off. These weren't just random cars. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. It was like a chill wind, even in the warm cab. Started taking more back roads, making unexpected turns, doubling back, trying to shake whatever was following us, or at least confirm my suspicions. My grip on the wheel tightened. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every distant glint of chrome felt like a pair of eyes watching. The casual hum of the highway suddenly sounded like a tense, low thrum, a warning. Lara, sensing my shift, became even quieter, her body language stiffening, her gaze also flickering to the mirrors. We didn't need to speak it aloud. The unspoken fear filled the space between us, a shared understanding of the looming danger. The sun was starting to dip, casting long orange shadows across the fields, when I finally pulled into a small, out-of-the-way diner. It looked like the kind of place forgotten by time, tucked away off an old service road. We needed to eat, and more importantly, we needed to blend in for a bit, look like normal travelers. Stepping out of the truck, Lara pulled the worn baseball cap I'd given her low over her face. She looked exhausted, truly spent, and I could see the fresh fear etched around her eyes. Inside, the diner was quiet. Just a couple of old-timers at the counter. We slid into a booth in the corner, trying to be invisible. Thor stayed in the truck, his head resting on the dash, keeping watch. While we waited for our food, Lara started talking, softly, almost to herself. She didn't go into huge detail, but she spoke about William's cruelty, not just physical, but how he chipped away at her spirit, making her feel small, worthless. She talked about the constant fear, the feeling of being trapped, and how this whole escape was less about bravery and more about pure, raw desperation. I just listened, offering a nod here and there, feeling a strange mix of anger for what she'd been through and a growing respect for her resilience. It was the first time she'd really opened up, and in that quiet diner, surrounded by strangers, our bond solidified, built not just on the road we shared, but on the shared weight of her past. We got back on the road after that, the food doing little to ease the tension. It was almost dark now, and the fading light made every shadow seem deeper, every sound sharper. I was driving on instinct, taking roads I rarely used, pushing the big rig harder than I should have. That's when it happened. Coming around a sharp bend on a deserted stretch of road, a dark SUV was suddenly there, blocking the lane. No lights, just sitting dead in the middle. My heart jumped into my throat. Before I could even fully register it, Thor let out a guttural bark, a deep, warning growl that shook the cab. His hackles were up, eyes fixed on the vehicle. That was all the warning I needed. I didn't hesitate. I swerved hard, hauling the wheel to the right, kicking up a rooster tail of gravel and dirt, barely missing the ditch. The rig lurched, the trailer groaning, but I kept it steady. As we sped past, I caught a glimpse of figures. In the SUV, dark shapes, and then the flash of something metallic. A shot, I think, or maybe just the glint of light off a weapon. The adrenaline surged through me, cold and sharp. Lara gasped, a stifled cry of pure terror, pressing herself deeper into the seat. We were being hunted, no doubt about it now. This wasn't just some vague threat, it was real. My hands were shaking on the wheel, but I gripped it tighter, forcing myself to stay calm. We were out of that immediate danger, but the close call had changed everything. The game had just gotten real. We couldn't stop at any more diners, couldn't risk main roads. We had to disappear. I found an old, abandoned field off another forgotten road, overgrown and barely visible from the highway. I killed the engine, and the silence that fell was thick and heavy, broken only by our ragged breathing and the distant hum of night insects. Lara was trembling, her face pale in the dim light, her eyes still wide with the shock of what had just happened. She just kept repeating, "They found me, they almost had me." It was pure, raw fear. I tried to reassure her, but my own heart was pounding like a drum. Thor, still on high alert, paced restlessly in the limited space, his low growl a constant reminder of the danger lurking out there. We ended up sleeping in the cab, or trying to, huddled together, me leaning against the wheel, Thor curled at our feet. Every rustle outside, every distant sound sent a jolt through us. The night was long, filled with shadows, and the chilling realization that our lives were literally on the line, chased by people who wouldn't hesitate to kill. The next few hours, and what felt like an eternity, were a blur of back roads, whispered conversations, and the constant hum of the engine. We stuck to routes rarely used by big rigs, dirt paths and old state roads that curved through endless fields and forgotten towns. The silence between us, once heavy with unspoken fear, slowly began to change. It filled with small, raw pieces of our lives. Lara started talking more about her past, about how she'd grown up in a family where appearances were everything, where you didn't question the powerful, where a woman's role was often just to be quiet and agree. She spoke about her mother, how she'd seen her submit, always, to the men in her life, living in a quiet cage of fear and unspoken disappointments. Lara carried that fear too, but it was mixed with a fierce anger, a desperate refusal to let that be her own destiny. She talked about the guilt, the self-blame for not reacting sooner, for letting things go on for so long, and the terrifying weight of suddenly being responsible for revealing a secret that could get her killed. And me? I found myself talking about my own life, the loneliness of the road, a difficult past that had left me wary of getting too close to anyone. The miles rolled by, and with each one, a layer peeled away, revealing the raw human fear and hope that lay beneath. The sun was starting to come up, painting the sky in a bruised purple and orange, when Thor suddenly went rigid. He'd been dozing in the back seat, but his head snapped up, ears swiveling, a low, barely audible growl rumbling deep in his chest. I followed his gaze, scanning the desolate stretch of highway we were on. Nothing, just an empty road ahead, and a distant shimmer of heat rising from the asphalt behind us. But Thor never made a mistake. I instinctively took the next exit, small, barely paved turnoff that led to nothing but an old abandoned gravel pit. I pulled the truck in, cutting the engine, and we waited, barely breathing. Less than a minute later, a dark sedan, windows tinted, sped past the highway exit we'd just taken, not even slowing down. It was probably the same one from before. They blew right by the turnoff, not even glancing this way, probably assuming we'd kept going straight. My heart was pounding, the blood rushing in my ears. Thor had saved us. Again. Without him, we would have driven right into their path. Lara looked at me, her eyes wide, a silent acknowledgement of how close we'd come. The relief that washed over us was so potent it almost made me dizzy, but it was quickly replaced by the cold, stark reality. They were still out there, and they were relentless. We couldn't let our guard down for a second. The final stretch of the journey was the hardest. Every mile felt like 10. Every shadow held a hidden threat. We were getting closer to the capital, and with every city limit sign we passed, the tension inside the cab cranked up another notch. My jaw ached from clenching, my eyes burned from constantly scanning the mirrors. The quiet hum of the truck seemed to amplify every sound, every distant siren, every approaching vehicle. Lara was a bundle of nerves beside me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the road, occasionally glancing at the small USB drive she kept hidden in her pocket. That tiny. Some piece of plastic held her freedom, her future, and the downfall of a powerful criminal. The weight of that responsibility, of carrying her hope, was heavy on my shoulders. I was just a truck driver, used to hauling concrete and electronics, not human lives and explosive secrets. But there was no turning back now. We were in too deep, and quitting wasn't an option. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in fiery hues that mirrored the fire in my own gut. We arrived in the capital under the cover of dusk, the city lights a dizzying blur after days on dark, winding roads. I knew a discreet spot, a small, dimly lit parking lot behind an old building where truckers sometimes met for quiet exchanges. It wasn't much, but it was out of the way. We waited there for what felt like an eternity, nerves frayed, until a dark sedan pulled up just as Lara had described. A woman emerged, sharp-faced and focused, just like in the news photos. It was Teresa. Lara didn't hesitate. She scrambled out of the truck, moving with a speed I hadn't seen in days, and hurried towards Teresa, pulling the USB drive and some crumpled papers from her pocket. Their exchange was quick, hushed, a few urgent words, and then Teresa took the evidence, her eyes briefly meeting mine with a nod that spoke volumes, understanding, gratitude, and a hint of a silent promise. Lara looked back at me, a flicker of profound relief washing over her face, mixed with a deep, silent uncertainty about her future. They disappeared into the city lights, leaving me and Thor alone in the quiet hum of the truck. The mission was complete, but the silence that followed was heavy, filled with the echoes of a life changed, of a journey that had just ended, and a whole new one that was just beginning for us all. The moment Lara disappeared into the city, taking the evidence and her fragile hope with her, an incredible quiet settled over the truck. It wasn't just the absence of her voice or her nervous energy, it was a deeper silence, an emptiness that filled the space she'd occupied. For the past few days, every nerve ending in my body had been on high alert, focused on getting her to safety, on surviving. Now, with the immediate danger seemingly past, a strange mixture of exhaustion and an almost dizzying sense of relief washed over me. Thor, who had been a rock through it all, finally let out a long, shuddering sigh, settling down at my feet. I sat there for a long time, just watching the city lights, the distant hum of traffic. My hands still felt the phantom grip of the steering wheel, turning sharply, bracing for impact. It hit me then. Truly hit me. What we'd just done. A simple truck driver and a terrified runaway bride taking on something so much bigger than ourselves. There was a peculiar sense of accomplishment, a quiet pride in knowing we hadn't backed down, that we'd seen it through. But underneath it all, a different kind of feeling started to surface. A hollow ache in my chest where her presence had been. It wasn't long, maybe a week or two, when the news started breaking. My radio, which usually just played country music and traffic reports, was suddenly buzzing with names I knew. William's name, specifically. Teresa, that journalist, she'd done it. The reports were all over the place. William, along with several other prominent figures, arrested. Details about a massive money laundering scheme, how dirty money was being funneled through legitimate businesses, all laid. A bear. The articles talked about a key witness whose testimony and evidence were crucial. I knew with a certainty that went bone deep that they were talking about Lara. A quiet wave of triumph washed over me. All those miles, the close calls, the fear, the sleepless nights, it had been worth it. Justice, real justice, was being served because of the courage of a woman in a wedding dress and the stubbornness of an old trucker and his dog. It felt like a weight lifted, a sense of vindication, for every moment of doubt or fear. But even with the headlines screaming victory, I couldn't help but wonder about Lara. Where was she now? Was she safe? Was she finally free? The thought of her, out there somewhere starting a new life, brought a bittersweet ache to my heart. After Lara was gone, the road suddenly felt different. It was empty, a vast, open space that used to feel like freedom, but now just felt hollow. For over 2 decades, the hum of the engine, the endless asphalt, and the quiet company of Thor had been enough. More than enough, I'd always told myself. My life on the road was solitary by choice, a way to keep things simple, to avoid the complications of really connecting with people. I'd built walls around myself, brick by brick, after a past that taught me it was safer to be alone. I called it independence, but deep down, I knew it was loneliness. A quiet hum that had always been there, just below the surface. But when Lara was in that cab, even for just a few intense days, that hum had vanished. Her fear, her determination, her raw honesty, it had filled every corner of that space, pushing out the old emptiness. Now, with her gone, it wasn't just back, it was amplified. A silence that screamed louder than any engine. I knew she'd be entering some kind of protection program, disappearing for good, and the thought that I'd probably never see her again, that she was just gone, twisted something inside me. The days that followed were a blur of routine. I picked up new loads, drove my usual routes, but nothing felt the same. Every truck stop, every diner, every stretch of road reminded me of her. I'd catch myself looking at the passenger seat, expecting to see her quiet form, Thor curled at her feet. The memory of her bravery, the way she clutched that USB drive, the sheer terror in her eyes, but also that flicker of hope when she found someone to trust. It was all burned into my mind. I realized then that my old loneliness, the one I'd grown so comfortable with, had been a dull ache. What I felt now was sharp, a gnawing sense of something vital missing. The thought of going back to just the road, to the simple routine, felt unbearable. She had broken through my walls, not with a sledgehammer, but with a desperate, silent plea for help that I couldn't ignore. And in helping her, I had found a connection I didn't even know I was missing. It wasn't just about the cargo anymore. It was about the path we had shared, the human connection that transformed everything. The road ahead looked long, but suddenly the destination wasn't just about delivering goods. It was about something more. I tried to get back to normal. I really did. But normal felt like a foreign country I didn't want to visit anymore. The thought of Lara, safe but somewhere far away, became a constant hum in my mind. That old loneliness, the one I thought I had mastered, was now a gaping hole, and the only thing that felt right was the memory of her beside me. In that cab, facing down fear, I realized I couldn't just let her go. It wasn't about being a hero or getting thanks. It was about something deeper, a connection forged in fire that I hadn't known I craved. I started thinking about her, not just as the terrified bride I found, but as the strong, resilient woman who had fought for her life and for justice. The memory of her quiet courage, the vulnerability she showed, it had etched itself onto my soul. I didn't know where she was, or even her new name in the witness protection program, but a feeling, a gut instinct stronger than any I'd ever had on the road, told me I had to try and find her. I knew it was crazy, maybe even impossible, but the idea took root. A quiet, insistent whisper that grew louder with every mile I drove alone. It was a new kind of destination, one not marked on any map. So, after a few weeks of trying to shake that feeling, I stopped trying. I started asking around, subtly at first, among the few trusted contacts I had in the trucking world, people who knew how to find things, or knew people who knew things. It was a slow process, hitting dead ends, following faint whispers, driving countless extra miles on routes that weren't for cargo. I was looking for a ghost, a whisper in the wind. The days turned into weeks, then months. I thought about giving up more times than I could count. It felt like chasing a mirage, fueled only by a persistent memory and a longing I couldn't explain. I just kept driving, always keeping an eye out, always listening. Sometimes late at night, alone in the cab, I'd see her face in my mind, that hopeful, scared expression, and it would push me to keep going. I didn't have a plan, no exact destination, just a stubborn hope that if I kept looking, if I kept the possibility alive, somehow, somewhere, the road would lead me back to her. It was a journey of faith, driven by a heart that had finally woken up after years of quiet solitude. And then, one late afternoon, when the sun was painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I saw it. It wasn't on any map, and it wasn't a landmark I knew from my years on the road. It was just a small gravel road, barely more than a path, leading to a modest farmhouse. And there, on the weathered wooden gate, painted in bright, hopeful yellow, was a sunflower. A simple, perfectly rendered sunflower, as if someone had just finished it. My breath hitched. It was a detail I hadn't known I was looking for, a tiny, unexpected beacon in the vastness of my search. I pulled the rig over, the engine humming softly, and just stared. Thor, sensing my sudden stillness, looked up at me, then peered out the window towards the gate. I killed the engine, and the silence that fell was profound. Slowly, a figure emerged from the porch of the farmhouse. A woman. She walked towards the gate, her steps calm and steady. And as she got closer, as the light caught her face, I knew. It was Lara. She stopped at the gate, a few yards from my truck, and her eyes, soft and knowing, met mine. There was no surprise, no shock, just a quiet, gentle smile, a silent welcome. In that moment, standing by that dusty road, with the setting sun behind her and the sunflower on the gate, I understood everything. It wasn't just about escaping danger or delivering evidence anymore. It was about finding something I didn't even know I'd lost. All those years on the road, chasing deadlines, living a solitary life, thinking that was all there was. They melted away. Lara didn't say a word, and neither did I. We didn't need to. Her quiet smile, the way she looked at me, it spoke volumes. It told me that the long, dangerous journey that started with a terrified bride running barefoot on the highway hadn't ended in a lonely truck stop. It had led me right here, to this quiet place, to a connection that felt more like home than any place I'd ever known. That day, the day I picked her up, it didn't just change her life, it changed mine too. It showed me that sometimes the most unexpected detours lead you exactly where you were always meant to be, right into the heart of a story that will stay with you forever.